ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with my friend Steve Hackman and myself, James Marsh. This week we are talking Joseph Kosinski's Top Gun Maverick.
Hey, but before we talk Top Gun Maverick, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive Movie Reviews, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. You know, we've topped 500 subscribers this week, and we want to give a special shout out to everyone who's already subscribed. But if you haven't, just go ahead and hit that button and join us on the film journey. Also, remember, Deep Dive Movie Reviews also contains spoilers, so you have been warned. James, I'm looking forward to talking Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, me too, actually. It's been 36 years since the original Top Gun launched Tom Cruise really into international sort of mega stardom, I think. And I mean, let's get this out of the way straight away. I'm not sure that people were really clamoring for a Top Gun sequel. And I think if they were, it was probably a long time ago. It was probably in the 80s. So the very idea of a Top Gun sequel now in 2022 is a bit of an odd one, and I can see why a lot of people might be a little bit skeptical about it going in. And I was probably one of them for a number of reasons that I think we're going to cover in some detail here. But I think a lot of that apprehension has been alleviated because, if nothing else, Top Gun Maverick is one hell of a ride. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Oh my God, James. I think in the last 2 weeks, I have seen with you two of the most incredible action films that have ever been created. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, as I've said multiple times on this show, action movies are not my sweet spot when it comes to film. This is not something I actively go looking for. Of course, I see them. I can enjoy a good one, but it's not what drives me to cinema. And after RRR, Top Gun Maverick has blown away my ideas of what an action film can be. And like you said, nobody was really, I think, pining for a 36-year return to Top Gun, as enjoyable as the first one was, but they superseded the first film. This is a better film than the original Top Gun.
Yeah, I think that is fair to say from a technical standpoint, if nothing else. The aerial photography in this film is absolutely sensational. A lot of it shot on IMAX cameras. A lot of the actors, obviously Tom Cruise, but a lot of the performers actually in the planes, in the air, if not piloting them, then convincing me that they were. But the photography is absolutely sensational. You know, I was getting kind of vertigo. I was getting airsick in the best possible way as these planes are doing barrel rolls and loop-de-loops over all kinds of terrain. I think that's the difference here between the first one. I mean, obviously the limitations, technical limitations of the first one were quite evident, but the thought that went into ensuring that behind the actors, the landscape that's and the terrain that they are flying over is different in each sequence to give each of the flying sequences, each of the battle sequences, its own sort of aesthetic. Just highlights the thought process that went into the crafting of this movie.
Well, I started thinking about the time sequence. We're talking 36 years. Now, think about it, James, from, say, World War II, let's say 1944 to 1945, where they're flying prop fighter planes, to 36 years later, we're talking early 80s, we're talking F-15, highly modern fighter jets in 36 years. There has been such a technological jump since 1986 to now. And it's seen in this film. They keep referring back to these old planes. In fact, we'll get into it, how they're able to make an escape on an old F-14 like we saw back in the original Top Gun. And it really struck me. This is a sequel unlike many sequels that we are accustomed to, where maybe 3, 4, 5 years has passed. A whole generation, possibly two, have transpired since we saw the original, and yet it was able to keep that same tone, that same vibe, but bring it forward into for a whole new generation.
Yeah. Go again. We're getting another of these what are being called requels, where it's kind of part reboot, remake, it's part sequel. We've seen it in everything from sort of Indiana Jones to Star Wars, Ghostbusters, even The Matrix recently. A lot, and we're going to see it in Jurassic World Dominion next week.
I thought you were going to say dominatrix there.
I was
Jurassic.
I'm revealing a little too much about myself there. Where essentially it's kind of retreading the same beats and the same overarching plot as the earlier film, the more successful film. But in order to avoid it being called a remake, they throw in these old legacy characters from the original. So in Ghostbusters, you've got like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd showing up in it. In The Matrix Resurrections, you've got Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss. When arguably they shouldn't really be in it. They're a bit too old. You've seen it in Halloween movies. You've seen it in Scream. Scream, the new Scream movie, actually talks about this quite explicitly in the film. And so when you're seeing Tom Cruise again getting, into the cockpit of one of these jets, I was hearing from a lot of people who were, questioning the validity of this movie and going, isn't he a bit old to be doing this? Yeah. And you had to admit ahead of time, he probably is, but it's Tom Cruise. He can still pull it off. And then you watch the film and you realize, oh, that's the point of the film. Yes. That's what the film is talking about more than anything else, is the fact that he is over the hill, but it's the only thing he's ever been any good at. And he has no ambition to be promoted any further. Early on, Ed Harris is like the admiral, and he pulls him up and he was like, you've been doing this for like 30, 40 years and you're still just a captain. You should be a 2-star admiral like Iceman actually is. Or you should be a senator or something. Why are you still just a captain fooling around in the airplanes? And he says, well, this is what I love to do. And this is the only thing that I've ever been any good at. And as it turns out, that's the reason why he, just to give the outline of the plot, is invited / ordered to go back to Top Gun to train the best of the best, these pilots, in how to fly an F-18, which is considered like a relic now, but is the plane that he was so good in, because they have to use these particular planes to do this particular covert mission, and no one knows how to operate them except him.
Yeah. Well, an earlier version of the script had for Tom Cruise to just have kind of a smaller, lesser role, and it was going to move on to the next generation. And thank God they didn't end up going in that direction, because this film rests solely on the shoulders, and its success comes because of Tom Cruise. That's it, bar none. And one of the things, even though you mentioned they kind of make allude to the fact that he's over the hill and they've got these new young bucks that have come up underneath him, they smartly avoid the trope of like having the young pilots best him and him starting to question, am I still good enough to do that? They avoided that altogether. Right from the get-go, he is the best of the best. He puts these kids in their place. They can't even believe when he's popping up out of nowhere and tagging them from behind in these simulated fighter crews. And I remember sitting in the theater thinking, I'm really glad they didn't go that angsty route of, do I still have what it takes? I don't know if I can do this. No, in fact, if anything, it's that great moment when Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer are hugging one another, and Val Kilmer says, who's the best pilot, and Tom's good. Let's not ruin this moment.
Well, this is the interesting thing, is it's not a film about him questioning his own ability. It's a film about everybody else questioning his ability.
Absolutely.
And him going, no, I have not pursued a higher calling for a reason. This is what I'm good at. I'm the best person at this. Just let me continue to do it until I can't do it anymore. And what I liked so much about that is you hear Tom Cruise speaking. I mean, yes, of course, he is saying the lines because it's Maverick saying the lines, but it's Tom Cruise speaking just as much as it's Maverick speaking. Yeah. I mean, Tom Cruise is always getting sort of criticized, or at least it's getting commented on a lot that he does all his own stunts. He's still doing these action roles that people half his age are doing. Shouldn't he be moving on to something a little bit more dignified? And he's like, but this is me. This is what I'm good at. This is me at my best. Let me do it, and I'm going to keep doing it for as long as I can, until, well, let's hope not, but until it kills me almost. And it's a beautiful way, I thought. It was quite elegant of just aligning Tom Cruise and Maverick, his signature role. The Mission Impossible movies are fantastic, but he'll always be Maverick.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was the perfect sort of send off. It was the perfect way of aligning his career with his greatest role, bookending it, if you like, and going, we are essentially the same guy, or at least we have the same aims and we have the same calling.
Well, it takes somebody of Tom Cruise's caliber and professionalism to be able to bring these actors together. I know that he actually invited the crew out, the actors who play his pilot crew, onto his home for a chemistry test. He wanted to make sure that right down to the chemistry, this movie has to work at every level. And that's why there will never be a Top Gun 3. Cruise knows this film is exactly what he wanted to deliver. It supersedes the first one. It cannot be topped. And this is a perfect swan song for Maverick Pete Mitchell, because this is a wonderful flick. And one of the points I want to raise, James, is obviously the movie, as we mentioned, is 36 years old. It's mid-80s. I thought they did a wonderful blending of soundtrack and music from the 80s to give us this 80s vibe while constantly reminding us this is 2022 with other music and it was, to me, it was a perfect blending. I love when Jennifer Connolly's character's introduced in the bar when she walks out, and David Bowie's Let's Dance is playing on the jukebox. And
right.
I just thought at that moment, this is a very thoughtful and mindful film about knowing what worked best in the first film, but not retreading every aspect of it and bringing what needs to be brought forward into the new generation.
Yeah, I think it was a collaboration between, I think, Hans Zimmer and Harold Faltermeyer, who of course did the original Top Gun theme, and Lady Gaga was involved in the mix.
She was, yeah.
And also Lorne Balfe, I think that's how you say his name as well. I think he was involved too, as a kind of sort of supervisor. But yeah, it paid such loving homage to the old movie without simply just rehashing it. There are sort of updated versions of some of the, original beats in the movie, not least the opening sequence where you've got Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone playing again to essentially a montage of jets landing on and taking off from an aircraft carrier. And you're kind of like, at that moment, if I'm completely honest, I was kind of in two minds. On the one hand, I was like, oh yeah, here we go. And on the other hand, I was like, this is exactly how the first movie starts. So please don't just do it again.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it's not, and it knows exactly what it's doing, and it's setting the scene quite wonderfully. If
you could package that opening sequence on the aircraft carriers with all the planes taking off and landing and coming up in the elevator and that whole choreography, what's going on, if you could bottle that, it would give Viagra a run for its money.
It's quite a stimulating moment, that's for sure. But yeah, the other thing we need to talk about is the main kind of dramatic conceit of this film is that when Maverick does return to Fighter Town, USA, to the Top Gun school, where he has to train these previous graduates who are all top of their class. Amongst them is a young lad called Rooster, who is none other than Goose's son, played here by Miles Teller. They haven't really spoken very much, and obviously Rooster, well, let's be honest, blames Maverick for Goose's death in the first movie. And so that is the sort of the big sort of emotional hurdle that both of them are faced with and have to sort of jump over. And I thought that was handled actually pretty well. It avoids some of the sort of the cliched confrontations that you might expect.
Well, I was going to say one of the reasons that it avoids the cliche is that it circumvented it just resting their tension resting solely on him holding Tom Cruise, Maverick, responsible for his dad's death. Because I even leaned over to my wife at one point and go, I really hope they don't do this whole angst thing that he holds his, Tom Cruise responsible for his dad's death, because he was a young boy at the time.
Yeah, he was
36 years had passed. There is no way that if they're going to use that as the vehicle for this tension, it's going to lose it for me here. And they didn't. They gave another reason, and obviously this is a spoiler show, so I can say what that reason is. Tom Cruise, in order to protect him and to as a pledge he made to the mother,
Right.
played by Meg Ryan in the first film, has said, I'm going to basically try to keep him from flying, and kept him from or denied his request for going to the Naval Academy, which in the film we learned set his career back a number of years. Now that would piss me off. And now
Right.
suddenly I realize, okay, now they've given a valid reason why this tension between the two exists.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's kind of like the main instigating factor. It's Maverick's desire to protect him, but inability to do it the right way, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, he's a surrogate father figure, but he's crap at it.
Yes. Yeah. He's not a good father, you know.
No. And so it's again, it's about Maverick addressing that, and you know, spoilers, getting better at being a sort of responsible sort of role model for Rooster, which he manages to do.
Yes,
no surprises. You know, they sort those issues out. They work through them in quite spectacular fashion.
No, this film, progresses on a very linear line. There's no huge surprises here. The guy gets the girl, the mission succeeds. There's a lot of tension between here and there, but in the end, Maverick and the red, white, and blue is waving. I would suspect that naval recruitment will once again, like it did in the first movie, jump after this movie releases.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be at all surprised. I mean, it really is, as we've said already, that the aerial photography is phenomenal. It is absolutely gorgeous. You know, if you're debating whether this film is worth seeing in a cinema or seeing it in IMAX, yes, the answer is absolutely yes. See it in IMAX if at all possible. That's how it was shot. It looks and sounds phenomenal, and the fight sequences themselves are real nerve-shredding stuff. And I think a lot of that is, I mean, obviously a lot of that is because Tom Cruise is a crazy person. Yeah. And, you know, he is willing to commit a couple of years of his life to training to fly one of these planes so that you can put the camera like right here in his face and do the barrel rolls and fly through gorges and all the rest of it and get the kind of shots and the kind of coverage that makes you believe that this is all really happening. But I think this is one of the areas where the director, Joseph Kosinski, should get some praise as well. When I saw that he was directing it, I was like, okay, I mean, he is probably best known for directing Tron Legacy, which was kind of a very pretty, very slick looking reboot, again, a kind of reboot of Tron that I don't think was a particularly good movie or good story, but I think it looked great. And then he did a film with Tom Cruise previously called Oblivion, which was a sci-fi movie, which again looked great, wasn't so much narratively. And then he did a kind of blue collar firefighter movie, bushfire firefighter movie called Only the Brave, which incidentally also starred Miles Teller and Jennifer Connolly, which is okay, you know, and it's one of these real heart on their sleeve kind of all American tragic true stories about, you know, brave firefighters doing what they do. But there was nothing that had really won me over. I mean, let me put it this way. Going into this, I was like, okay, I'm confident that visually it's going to look good because of this track record. However, I wasn't prepared for just how successful narratively and thematically, or how dense thematically this film was going to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when you talked about, too, the aerial shots, you know, each of the pilots had to learn, they actually got a little mini film school. They had to learn cinematography because they had to learn how to film themselves while actually pretending to be piloting an aircraft. And apparently they shot 800 hours of footage, which surpasses even The Lord of the Rings for the amount of footage filmed for a single movie. But it got me thinking, James, about when we reviewed the movie Wings, the very first.
I was just about to say
the first winner for the best picture, and part of our best picture every best picture series, and all the aerial footage they got by training the pilots to have cameras in the cockpit with them and teaching them how to operate the cameras. And I thought we'd said back then how Wings had really set the foundation for all the great aerial footage we'd see in the future. I just made that connection when I read that that detail about Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way. I was like, oh, that's like Wings, you know, where they were responsible for filming themselves, because I mean, back then it was just because you've only got like 4-minute reels of film and you had to actually learn how to reload it. And now it's all to do with like the color timing and the exposure and the, you know, making sure that the shot is good. But it really pays off. It's fantastic. It's a lovely kind of piece of trivia that almost exactly 100 years later, that films, that film about a similar topic is using similar techniques, albeit technologically completely different.
You know, James, one of the reasons I love this film is because I am 55 and I saw Top Gun in the cinema as a young teenager. And so I've seen those intermittent years, and now I am in that stage of life that Tom Cruise is in, and you're wondering, you know, and we've talked in previous films about that had similar plot lines about regret and looking back and having that kind of rear view mirror on one's life. So it was great to see Val Kilmer in this, because Val really connects us back to the original film, because Val Kilmer was such an integral part of that film. The conflict that the two had, the tension, what's the word I'm trying to think, the rivalry that they had, and how they matured that to where they're in this film very close friends. And Val Kilmer's Iceman has actually been protecting Tom Cruise all along, because he sees Maverick as being necessary for the US military. And even though sometimes the military, as this film is often reminding us, wants to get rid of him because he's too much of a maverick. And so to have that wonderful scene, and we all know that Val Kilmer really struggles. It has throat cancer in real life and finds it very difficult to speak. And so he doesn't speak through a lot of the scene. But I even mentioned to my wife, I said, you know, just for cinematic impact, they're going to close with him talking with his real voice to Tom. And as soon as he did it, my wife leaned over and winked at me, you know, but it was such a touching scene. And I thought, again, the filmmakers knew exactly what the audiences want to see, what they will respond to. And they did it for me.
Yeah, I would have been very disappointed if Iceman had not been in it, because he won. You got to remember, in Top Gun, Maverick doesn't win Top Gun.
No,
Iceman wins Top Gun. I think Maverick gets enough points to graduate, and in this movie they say he came second. I don't remember if that's even true, actually. I think he just graduated. And so the idea that Iceman, unless he had been killed in combat somehow, that he wasn't around anymore.
I was going to say, you would know, though, because you've watched this film so many times, as you've let us know in our top 5 Tom Cruise films.
I have watched Top Gun many, many, many times. Unfortunately, you have 10 years on me, and so I didn't see it in the cinema when it first came out. However, it was on regular repeat on VHS throughout the early 90s with me and my mates. So yes, I know it back to front. I could quote every line. So I was thinking, because how are they going to deal with Iceman? How are they going to deal with Val Kilmer? And I think they did it in the best possible way. You know, his name comes up almost immediately. We discover that he is now head of the Navy. You know, he's the what do you call it? He's commanding admiral, commander, or whatever. Commander
of the Pacific Fleet.
Right. And yeah, like you say, he's been.
I'm the American. I'll let you know about this whole American stuff. Yeah.
I think in the UK that would be a Commodore or so. I don't know. I'm getting out of my depth there as well. But and like you say, he's like a guardian angel for Maverick, because he understands who Maverick is and where his strengths lie and where they don't lie. And if he had been pushed up the chain of command, it wouldn't have done anybody any favors. And so I was thinking, how are they going to deal with it? And they do it in the most sensitive and respectful way, which is essentially writing Val Kilmer's health issues into the character. You know, so he's, you know, they say, oh, he's kept it secret, but he has throat cancer. He doesn't have long to live. You know, it is a problem, but he wants to see you. And it leads to this, incredibly sort of touching reunion between the two guys, which is perfect for the movie. It really just helps encapsulate the degree of respect and reverence, and it makes you realize that this sequel, it's not just a Tom Cruise vanity project. I think there is a bit of that in there. There's a little bit of that.
Yeah, but
it is more than that. It is about a reverent, nostalgic, look back on just this great movie and all the strengths of it.
And this is where the 36-year gap works, because if there hadn't been that length of time, what really works is Val Kilmer's Iceman being in the position he's at. And it's going to take that long to become the commander of the Pacific Fleet. And so to be able to juxtapose where they were in the first film and seeing a fully lived career in the second film was a wonderful bookend. I just love now we have these two films that are 36 years apart and yet are woven so seamlessly together.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think the timeline does work. There's a couple of little areas where it doesn't work, like Rooster would be 40 now, at least, something like that. And so, in little bits like that, but you got to play around with these things. I think the one area where the film isn't as, I don't want to use the word respectful, because I'm not sure if it's quite that much of a problem, but the area where it doesn't achieve as much nostalgic respect for the original as it does in other areas is with the female characters, right? And it's practical reasons. I mean, Kelly McGillis is 5 years older than Tom Cruise, so she's about 65, and she's and she looks her age, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it wouldn't have made sense for her to come back as a romantic interest for Maverick.
And it wouldn't, to be honest, I didn't have a problem with her not being in the film, and that has not besmirching her, but as far as just as a character and as a part of the plot, Maverick's character, I mean, that woman was a professional. She was older than him. This was a fling. This is not something that they were going to, have their kids together. And we all knew that this was a short-lived romance. So there's no questions. I mean, obviously, connecting with, and I love the fact that Jennifer Connolly is an age-appropriate love interest for him. It worked. In fact, even my wife was saying to me, "Okay, Steve, how are we going to do an exercise plan so you're looking like Tom Cruise and I'm looking like Jennifer Connolly?" I said, "Honey, I don't think that plan exists." But
not for you. I think Tammy's doing all right. I think you've got some work to do. You've got some work to do.
Well, okay. Point taken.
But and it does deal with that. I mean, it's fitting for the character of Maverick that he is, he's a loner, and he's had some flings this time, and it makes sense that Betty, Jennifer Connelly's character, is a former flame. That he has come in and out of her life a few times over the years, by the sounds of it, and each time, the daughter says at one point, "It's like, just don't leave her in tears this time." Because
it seems to be a pattern.
Yeah, and there's this running joke about a look, about the Tom Cruise look that he gives her, and even his male counterparts, like in the early scenes where he's a test pilot for the stealth fighter, and they're like, "Don't give me that look," and he's like, what look? This is just my look. This is just my face," which I thought was another great play on Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise has such a discernible face and such a discernible profile. For such a long time, marketing for any of his movies was just his face in profile. So I think it's another layer of the just acknowledgement that this is the moneymaker, and he's got one thing. And so she's like, "It's that look again," and the other guys were going, "Don't do that face again." He's like, it just hammers home the fact that he's good at one thing. And he will never change, and he hasn't changed. The rest of the world is changing, and he has to, adapt or die, essentially. Okay, I just want to give a few shout outs to some of the rest of the supporting cast, because I think it's quite a really strong, robust ensemble. We mentioned that Ed Harris pops up at the very beginning. Also, I think Jon Hamm is actually really good in this. He plays kind of the antagonistic admiral who runs the Top Gun Academy and is very much sort of the primary antagonist in this story. He's the guy reluctant to have Maverick come on board, who sees him as a joke, who sees him as nothing but trouble. Why are we wasting our time on this guy? We'll just get, we'll just get someone else to do it. Because there's this whole idea about going on in the background about drones and about how, you know, I was about to say manned space flight, but manned airplanes are sort of on the way out anyway, and that there are certain research projects to push unmanned drones. That's going to make the entire Top Gun program and everything around it completely obsolete. And so they're, you know, in the long term, they're pushing up hard against technology in that respect. But on the other hand, the specific mission, which incidentally is fairly non-specific and quite deliberately so, you know, the enemy nation in this in the climactic mission is deliberately left anonymous. I think they are a threat to NATO, and I think that's about as far as you get in terms of who they are or where they are.
But by the topography, I'm pretty sure it was the Canadians.
Damn those pesky Canucks. But it was there's a basically Jon Hamm represents the military's perspective on this, which is essentially it's a suicide mission, and these pilots are expendable. And obviously Maverick is against that. And he's like, no, I can train them well enough. If you give me the time, give me one more chance, I will train them well enough that they can do this and get home. Because it is kind of an impossible mission, which bears more than a passing resemblance to the mission at the end of Star Wars.
Oh, but yes. No, there was definitely. I even leaned over at Tammy at one point when they were going in the trench.
Yeah.
Going, use the Force, Luke.
Well, exactly. It's like, talk to me, Goose. And just the idea of, dropping bombs down a small hole.
Of course. And then the hotshot pilot, just when they're going to get shot down, there's the Han Solo moment, you know. There's a bit of deja vu there. You're like, I've seen this before somewhere. Yeah. But he's determined to train them so that they can get out of there alive. And so he butts head with Jon Hamm repeatedly during the movie. And I think Jon Hamm is good at being that kind of blowhard, officious antagonist. He's great at that. Yeah, he's fantastic. And you know, at the beginning of the film with the great scene with the hypersonic jet, they could have had any grumpy old general come in and give his 5 minutes at the beginning of this film, but they used Ed Harris, and Ed Harris makes everything better. You know, it's like Tom Cruise is thinking, who do we cast? Even though it's a 5-minute moment on screen, Ed Harris will make this film better, and he does.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Ed Harris, it's very rare when Ed Harris does not elevate the material that he's in. And then you've got this, they're not given enough, or no, they're given plenty, but they're not given much sort of screen time to really develop as individuals. But you do have obviously the rest of the class. Rooster's classmates, and you've got Monica Barbaro in there and Glenn Powell.
There was a girl. There wasn't a girl in the first. In 36 years, they let women fighter pilots. Now they didn't let women fighter pilots in 1986.
Well, women drivers, they're just
those are multi-million-dollar
they're
vehicles.
Very expensive,
they let women drive those.
I know that's why drones are coming in. They're just like, no, I'd rather have unmanned AI than a girl driving my plane.
I'm going to have to edit. I'm going to have to edit this because even though you and I are being obviously ironic and tongue in cheek, there's going to be somebody who takes it seriously.
Let's hope not. But and Monica Barbaro, she holds her own. She's the right kind of female character to. She's obviously come up through the academy and what have you, and can stand her ground and obviously it's pretty good. And I thought Glenn Powell was good as a kind of Iceman-ish, kind of very cocky, arrogant sort of flyboy.
Not to. I'm sorry. What's the female actress name again?
Monica Barbaro.
Monica Barbaro's role. What other things I thought was really good about her is it is different these days to have a woman in that role, and a lot of films will then have they'll create an artificial encounter to show how tough she is and that she's as good as any guy. And I hate when they put that moment in, because the minute they do, to me, it diminishes and it elevates that there's some kind of difference. What I loved how this film embraced that was she is there because she's as good as any one of those. We don't have to create an artificial scene to demonstrate that for the audience. it's just a given. And I love that the films are finally starting to go that way, where men and women can just operate in this equality without any manufactured scenes to help us along the way with that.
Oh, it's a complete non-issue.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think it's raised once even by her classmates that you're a girl, therefore ... nor even that her classmates are kind of, there's a sleazy guy who keeps hitting on her or anything like that. I don't think there's even any of that. She's just one of, I don't want to say one of the boys, but she's just one of the pilots.
One of the team, yeah.
And that's it. And they move on, which is, yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like, yes, that is progress, unfortunately. That counts as legitimate progress in 2022.
Exactly. So, James, in summing up Top Gun Maverick, what unit of measurement are we going to give to rate this? Which I think we're going to concede we're going to give a highly rated mark to. Interesting.
I hadn't thought of this. What would be a good, I've got no idea actually. What would be good?
How many
obsolete
F-14
I was gonna say how many great balls of fire.
Which was a great scene.
Yes, that was nice.
So James, if we go with great balls of fire to pay homage to a great scene that they had in this film, how many great balls of fire would you give Top Gun Maverick? Yeah, I've been kind of like back and forth a little bit about this one, because I mean, I thought it was great, and I thought it was a really intelligent sequel to, you know, a film that I love dearly and didn't realize that I needed a sequel to. I thought it's Tom Cruise firing on all cylinders, you know, embracing his public image and his star power as the last remaining Hollywood superstar, really. Movie star in a landscape of IP and superhero movies. He's pretty much the only one there, and he gets it, and he knows what he's doing. And this was as much about him reflecting on his own career as it was about Maverick doing his stuff. And those flying sequences were absolutely spectacular. So it really did work for me. Incidentally, I'm going to see it again this weekend. With my father-in-law, actually, who loves that kind of thing. So I'm of two minds whether to give it 4 or 5. And I know that I've been giving a lot of things 5, and I think that might be the only thing. Give it 4.5. You can give a half, James.
I can't give a half. I've sworn against halves. And I know I've been giving a lot of 5s lately because I've seen a lot of great movies, and that's kind of holding me back somewhat. So do you want to talk me into going one way or the other?
Yeah, I will. At the beginning of this, like I said, there's been 2 movies that have demonstrated to me what an action film is supposed to be. RRR and Top Gun Maverick. To me, this is the best of the genre of which it represents. And to me, I probably went in with less expectations than you did. And I came out going, wow. And when I come out with that feeling, I can't help but give it a 5.
That loving feeling?
I had lost that loving feeling, and it had given it back to me. I'm going with 5 great balls of fire. Then sure. You know, in the interests of camaraderie, teamwork, and being each other's wingman on this very important mission, I see no alternative than to follow suit and award it 5. Well, dang, James, if it wasn't raining outside, I challenge you to a beach volleyball game just
that nobody would want to watch.
I'm getting a hip replacement. I'll be great when this is done.
I might win. Okay.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Deep Dive Movie Reviews. You've heard James and I score. What's yours? Give us a comment in the box below. Remember, you can find James and I on social media. If you're looking to follow us, we're on Twitter and on Instagram, and you'll find those links in the description box below. James?
Yes, please do let us know what you thought of the film. Let us know what else you'd like to see us review in the future. Many, many thanks again to our first 500 subscribers. Tell your friends, share some of our videos on your social media. We want to double that score, triple that score, and go onwards and upwards to bigger and better things in the future. And we would love it for you to come with us.
Till next episode. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.